Okay, great. Welcome everybody this month for the August update for NeuralSeek. So I'm going to take you through the changelog and then just dive into the product and kind of show you what's new, what we've been working on, and where we're headed. Let's do it. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. And so you can always get to the changelog again as you're in the product. Just click on the head up here and you'll go to what's new, or when you're out in our documentation, it's just here at the bottom. So for August, a bunch of new features came in. I'm going to talk about them real briefly, and then we're going to go dive and play around with it. So one of the bigger new features that came in, we call mAIstro Min Confidence. And so basically what that is as you're doing a seek, like a normal seek flow, and you hit your minimum confidence threshold, and that again could either be in total or by category, right? We'll let you run a custom mAIstro flow at that point. Now, you might say, well, why do I want to do that? Twofold. You can use that to create a contextually aware note about, like, I don't know about this thing. And then even refer back to like previous questions to like help deconflict where the bot or the agent might be confused about things, or we didn't get the documentation that the user thought we should have. But you can also do a whole lot more powerful stuff with it. And again, our whole go forward plan with NeuralSeek is really tying in mAIstro, which is the backend engine that we use to build everything inside the platform, and expose it up to users so that you can do more powerful things. So, what are some of those more powerful things, right? Let's say that you've got a public facing website and you've hit your minute confidence a bunch with, new user questions. Like, today on Monday, most of the user questions have hit minimum confidence. Because you are using a mAIstro Min Confidence, you can kick off a downstream flow. So I can say, hey, go look up in my history log if I've had X amount of responses today that hit my minimum confidence. If so, send an automated email out. Or kick off a trouble ticket into Jira saying, hey, we need to update documentation around this area, or anything, right? You can kick off whatever process, run anything that you want that's possible in mAIstro, which is pretty much unlimited. So, we're starting to use that internally just to do that, right? So out on our public website, we obviously use NeuralSeek. We used to send interns out to kind of check through, the logs every now and then, see what people are asking, and then note the holes that we had of like how users approach asking questions to us, the way that we write documentation, which would oftentimes, lead to some minimum confidence questions. This way we can automate some of those things so that you can directly get eyes onto a user problem in an area where you have a shortfall in documentation and not have to wait till somebody thinks to look. So next one, semantic insights. We make it a little bit easier in the governance tab to help tune the thing, right? So you may see terms end up in the hallucinated terms list that you don't view are hallucinated. We've proven with the matching that it didn't actually come from your documentation, but that might not really mean that it's not a thing that you're okay with, right? Usually this comes for like verbose product names, or like your documentation may use an acronym or vice versa. So you can allow list now directly from the governance tab, which is useful. Another big one that we launched this month was our data loader. So we had a bunch of customer engagements where people were really struggling to load Elastic and some of the other data sources, right, that don't have the greatest of UI or GUI. Or, they wanted to take massive documents and then chunk them and do complicated things to load them in for better search performance. So now, of course, we've paired that with mAIstro. So the document loader directly calls a mAIstro flow. So you can take huge documents, chunk them down, send them out to embeddings across hundreds of documents, and it's all built in and it's all no code. So again, super powerful. On the plus side of this, you don't have to use the data loader to load data, right? When you think about it at its most basic, that data loader, it's a way to iterate through documents and do anything that you want with them inside of mAIstro. You could iterate through documents and make REST calls on them or do something different. And you don't have to load Elastic. You could load a structured database. You could load DB2, any of those things. We launched a whole new set of governance tabs specifically around mAIstro to help you understand what's going on with the platform, how it's responding over time, tokens being used, all of that stuff, sort of mirroring what we did early on with governance around Seek. And then some updates around Seek governance, filter by filter. So we have quite a few customers that are heavily using filtering inside of their Seeks. Not necessarily using categorization at all, but they filter almost everything. So now you can view the governance by specific filters applied, which is important because most of our HR-based customers, right, they're going to be filtering on location or time or department, things like that, so that you can quickly get a governance view or slice by that filter that is a location or department or things. Okay, let's dive into the product and start looking at some of these things. So right off the bat, minimum confidence or mAIstro minimum confidence. So I'm here in my IBM loaded instance that knows about IBM data and AI products. And I asked, Monty Python question here, what's the airspeed velocity of unladen swallow? And behind the scenes, right, it did actually match documents. So if I look at what the LLM wanted to answer, it picked up Python because they're probably talking about Python in some of these pages, velocity. So little sporadic things that would have gotten some semantic match. But we hit the minimum confidence scoring around this. And instead of giving that old default, I don't know answer that was hard coded, now we can specifically talk about the subject matter of the question, which makes things feel a lot more intelligent. Now, how we do this is, well, two parts. So over on the Configure tab, there's a new section here underneath minimum confidence that defines what template you want to run. And it could either be none, and you'll stick with your old static text, or we have an example that comes out of the box. So every new instance of NeuralSeek now is going to come preset to run that example flow. You can tweak it however you like, right? So in this one, I actually tweaked the example and made my own flow. So this is where you set it, where you build it over inside of mAIstro. So I'm going to come over to load user templates and load this one. And so we start off with sort of a magic note here, the minimum confidence in. And this is going to tell you all of the variables that Seek is going to provide in for you to do things with, like the original query, the context. So like what was asked before in the subject of the sentence? Like, are we talking about Cognos? Are we talking about the Indian Ocean? What's going on inside this conversation? The language, so the fun thing that you can do here. So instead of having like to have one set, I don't know answer in English or Spanish, it's now completely dynamic, right? So if you're using like match input on a virtual agent and you don't know what language is coming in, your minimum confidence message could be in any language, right? It could be in the matched language that came in on Seek. So whatever we found for the input language, and it's all dynamic. Then you get the intent and the category name, which may be useful for you in like how you formulate your response. So you basically, I've got a condition here. I want to check to see, I'm going to look for the minimum confidence message, the context, so to see, hey, do we know what the subject is? Is this like part of a multi-turn conversation? If it is, then I'm going to come and say a little bit more prompting, and I'm going to say, the user previously asked a question about this context. And then I'm going to send it off to my LLM with a little bit of prompting. So write a sentence in whatever language it is, saying you don't have any information about the original query, plus any context that's there. And that yields that nice, like, I don't know about this thing. But just like I did this, I could pull in REST calls, I could pull in file calls, I could kick out an integration to Jira. any of these things. You're not limited in just responding back. You can take any action you want inside of a minimum confidence message. Okay, next item, semantic insights. So since we're over here, let's go and look at governance for a bit. And so I talked about mAIstro governance having come in. So let's look at that a little bit, and then we'll go over to this semantic piece. So a few tabs are brand new. On the governance side, all instances are going to get this, what's called flow insights. And all of the bring your own language model instances are going to get token insights, right, to help you understand these things. So flow insights is really trying to drive down onto time it takes to run these things, cost it takes, right? Because the cost metric around mAIstro is 1/5 of a seek per language model event or per ML event that happens, right? And so you can see with the flows that I'm running, they're averaging about 1/2 of a seek of cost, right? And I'm doing some pretty powerful stuff when it comes down to it. mAIstro is cheap. Now, the other thing is that we've talked for a long time that mAIstro is a parallel processing engine. And I like this new chart because it really helps you understand what's going on the parallel processing side, right? So as you're looking at this radar chart, the top, the up and down, is the total end-to-end runtime, the parallel runtime. And then you'll see on the radials coming around are all of the component times in there, right? So the one that really stands out to me is this flow that spent about double the time in language models than the whole thing took, meaning really that 2 language calls went out at the same time and then came back, right? So that the amount of language time processing was essentially double the total time it took. And you can use this to help you understand, like, am I making the right use of the parallel processing engine? Like, what you don't want to see is that, like, all of the little things that you're doing yield a really high parallel runtime. That means you're not leveraging parallel processing at all in the system, and you might want to play a little bit on how you're making these calls. Now, remember back inside of mAIstro, any language model call that you make, and let's look back out at one of these things. Like this, right? So if I make my calls in this way, where I'm sending it to an action like a language model, and I immediately set it a variable coming off of that, that paralyzes the flow. If I was not setting a variable out of here, basically these would all flow in series because we'd be expecting that you'd be using the output of this one to go into the input of the next below it. But because these are all off in parallel, we collect them either at the first time that variable is used or at the end of the flow, whatever comes first, right? So in these cases, we can run multiple LLM calls all together, and they run essentially as fast as possible, connecting back up when those things are needed. So that should hopefully explain how we can have, on the parallel side, a much faster runtime than the sum of the components. Now, of course, for the template runs inside of here, I can filter down specifically on any of these pieces. So I can say, hey, I want to look just at the prospecting email here. And so I can say, okay, well, what was going on with this one? How much did it cost? And all of the run times for it. Now, below, right, you get to see essentially the speed over time, right? So I can look at my flows and say, is there anything I need to worry about? And on this one, there actually is, right? Because I had a flow that seemed to be doing pretty good over time. And then there's this big spike here, right? Really what happened is that one of the models that we're using on Watson XAI was having problems that day and lots of timeouts. And so we flagged it. Hey, this thing, we should switch the model, right? We should take some sort of remediation action because suddenly this is a really big outlier. So it really helps you troubleshoot what might be going wrong with your mAIstro flows on both the total flow And then once you say, oh, hey, here's the problem one, it looked like right around August 15th on the main. So let's go filter by that. So I want to go filter by main, and then we'll look just for the around the 15th. And so then you can kind of dive down and, okay, it looks like I had one or two flows in here that got really bad. And it was all language model time in there. So that's what my problem is. All right, next up is token insights. So similar to how the Seek token insights work, looking at as you're using mAIstro, input and output tokens, input output cost, right? Because nowadays, quite a few of the models out there have different costs, input to output tokens, and tokens per run, generated tokens, cost per 1,000 runs of that flow, token generation speed, which is actually pretty useful. So you can track, over time or by flow, like how well are these things actually generating and how fast. Just like on the Seek side, model cost comparison. So it looked like I was primarily using GPT-4 Omni. But if I were to jump around, what are some better models? So if I step down just a little bit in capability, I could jump into like a Claude 3, or I could step up to an Opus, right, and kind of increase my cost. But maybe I want to investigate using one of these slightly less capable models because it'll save me some cost. And then tokens over time. Which models are folks using and how much are they generating? Now on the semantic insights, right? So looking over at the hallucinated terms, let's go into one of the IBM instances. Because this one I was playing a lot to try to get some hallucinations going. Right. And so, yeah, we've got a whole bunch, but here's IBM Turbonomics in here. I can see why it kind of picked up on hallucination because it probably should be IBM Turbonomic, right? But maybe I do want to allow this as part of the answers. Because I'm clicking on this, I can directly add this to the allow list for the semantic model by clicking the term. Now, obviously, I'll have to have permissions to write configuration because this will definitely directly write the configuration. If I didn't have permissions, it would pop up an error as I tried saying, hey, you're not allowed to do that. Okay. Next up, data loader. Okay, so that's its own new tab out here on NeuralSeek. Now, we give you a little instruction box here on how to get to use this. Now, basically, it's very simple from a data loader perspective. You have your box here that I can drop in files. So let me find a few things, like maybe my speaker notes here and to JSON. So anything that'll be supported up in through the platform, which is Word, PDF, text, Excel, CSV, all of the normal sort of business documents. And then what template do I want to flow these through? In this case, I only have one. So let's go look at what that template looks like. It's this one. And we do give you a default template here. We'll actually start with that one, Elasticsearch Loader. And so in this one, right, sort of the magic thing that allows you to connect into that loader is setting the local document node to the NeuralSeek document loader. Basically, what we're going to do is as this is called for every document, we're going to dynamically inject the name of the document that you are processing into here, and the flow runs as normally, right? So it basically detaches you from having to have someone have access into the mAIstro pane and then manually upload a file and then like manually click on the thing and then bring it into the flow. In this case, we're just dynamically injecting the file name as if you had done all of that. Now, inside of here, it makes interesting use of some nodes that have been around for a long time. And so as you're loading up into Elastic or even Discovery, because we've got direct connectors down for all of those things, right? So if I'm going to go out and look at my knowledge bases, I've got direct connectors for Elasticsearch, Watson Discovery, Watson Discovery. a lot of times you want to break up larger documents into smaller chunks to better search, to get better performance out of your RAG applications, and you want to focus down on that. So in context loop, right, we have a setting called overlap, right? Because another technique around making a high performance RAG system is basically having it so that your passages or your paragraphs or your blocks of text that you have out in the knowledge base essentially window around each other. So the likelihood that if you're asking a question that has quite a bit of text as the desired answer, that you have one that, is split nice around it. And you didn't like accidentally split that one right in the middle of the answer when and that will yield a really poor performance, right? So as you increase the window, obviously, it's going to increase the space that you're spending out in that knowledge base, but it'll likely drive up the accuracy of the system because it's more likely that you've perfectly windowed the answer and not cut off something vital into another part of the document structure. So, this one's actually really simple. So what we're going to do is in Elastic, we'll use the, again, out of the box connector, make sure that we have our desired index. This will just be a blind push. This will fail, right? If the index already exists, but we don't care. We're going to run through this context loop for the document. So let's say the document's 1,000 pages. It's going to look and it's going to basically take 3,000 tokens worth of that thing with a window of 10% and just start to process it. So do a JSON escape, right? Because we're loading into Elastic, which is JSON under the covers. We need to get rid of all their quotes and things like that. So just an out of the box node, and then do our load. And so again, an out of the box piece here, I get to define the details, right, of my connection. And I could use, I didn't have to hard code this here. I probably should have used a secret, right? If I had one inside and just say, use my secret. I don't want my password hard coded in here. And then send that up into Elastic as my document name and my document text, and then continue looping until you're done. That's pretty much as simple as it gets for these loaders. But again, you can do so much more. You can make external REST calls. I could do, a lookup to a web search and infuse my information that's coming from a source with additional sources, right? I could load into a structured database. I could do splitting across this and load parts of the document into structured parts into another. It's really, there's no limit to it. It's whatever you want to do. Okay. And let's see, the last thing, seek evidence filter by filter. So let me go back out to Seek, and over here on this one, let's see. Got some filters on this side. Okay, great. Yeah, so on this instance, I have used a filter of coming from IBM.com, so I could filter by the filter here instead of by category and see questions that are specifically using that filter. Now, across the whole platform, right, we've made a lot of attempts to increase the linking between all these tabs. So if I'm here inside of mAIstro looking at, one of my templates, there's a direct link for the governance of this thing that sits out as you have the template loaded or you have the template run. So you can come in and directly filter by that thing so that you're not clicking around too much and you have that direct link through. So you can see this one, minimum conferences run 52 times in these dates as I played with the things and exposed this out. Any questions so far on what I've shown? Okay. If no questions, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview on where we're going next with NeuralSeek. Across the board, the concept of multi-agent is getting very popular. And we have customers today in NeuralSeek that are doing multi-agent approaches, right? It's by multi-agent. I hope people understand what I mean by an agent. And so agent is a nomenclature that popped up, I think, 6 months ago, that defines the bundling of a language model, a knowledge base, code, and maybe actions after the fact, which is what NeuralSeek has been doing for the last 2 years. So we, by default, are an agent-based platform. Multi-agent, therefore, is saying, okay, for a given bot or given use case, I may want to run a different configuration, a different agent for every single thing that comes in. And we definitely have customers that do that today. You do that today via things like filtering or things like proposals. And so we have customers that inside of the chatbot platform or Watson Assistant may flag on something in the conversation saying like, hey, this is an internal user or an external user, or I've identified this thing, and then dynamically pass to us a proposal or a configuration or other thing that they want to use for that specific run of the conversation. And we'll do it all day long. So it was relatively easy to get a multi-agent approach going. We're going to make that even easier and more flexible coming very soon. So inside of NeuralSeek, we already have the concept of categories, right, which help define and break down flows in larger buckets, and we've got proposals. So the logical step is to expose all of that stuff in the platform and let it be dynamic. So launching in a few weeks will be the multi-agent routing. So as I come into my flow, rather than there just being one configuration that I work with, for every single category, right, I'll get to define, do I want to run the default configuration? Do I want to run its own, right, a custom proposal? Or do I want to run a mAIstro flow for this category and just do something completely different or off the wall or custom RAG or whatever? So your mind can start getting going on this of like, okay, I can then therefore with no code build things that answer everything from small talk, hi, how's it going, off topic stuff if I wanted to allow that. I could have specific categories that just go to mAIstro and kick off flows or trouble tickets or other things directly. I could run different configurations for every single category. So for our larger organizations, every single stakeholder group, so you're looking at HR and budget and payroll and all of these things, they could have their own criteria for everything. They could be looking at a different knowledge base, a different set of filtering. Everything could be different and yet unified into the whole same structure, right? So the possibilities are pretty endless. The other big thing that we've been asked for over time is that, categorization. People love categorization, but then they kind of want to take it to the next level of having like a multi-tiered categorization where I've got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 things, where I first say like it's HR and then HR for Europe and then HR for Frankfurt in Europe, right? Which would be like a level 3. That's really easy to do inside of this scheme because as I throw each one of these on, I can then chain categories, right? So the categorizer will run with every step down the way, and you could have a different configuration for every single one of them, or use it to drive a complex category structure like that. We'll be doing more in depth around multi-agent as we get around to launching it, and there'll be a whole video series on how to do this as well. But this is definitely the next level of configuration that'll allow for a lot of things that people are starting to talk about. Okay, that was the main bits that I had for today. Any questions on what I've shown? Any questions on where we're going? Love to hear from you. If no questions, we'll give it another minute and then we'll close it off.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Garrett, are you seeing anything?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, we'll get the recording out to YouTube so that it can be shared. And our next webinar is, this one is August, the next one will be towards the end of September. And at this webinar, we will be doing live streaming so that it can be watched from multiple platforms, trying for LinkedIn and YouTube as well.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.